Welcome back. So, to offset Little Baby's wham, let's talk about something entirely different. So, Ethel Cain has released her new project. I'm going to call it a project even though it's an EP, even though this thing is an hour and a half long, titled Perverts. So, very out there title. It definitely sticks out. And especially to start off with a project like this at the beginning of 2025 is quite the endeavor, to say the least. Now, it currently sits at a 77% as a critic score and a user score of a 78. Very respectable. And with Ethel Cain, she has had quite a bit of critical acclaim, especially considering Preacher's Daughter that came out in 2022 with a critic score and a user score of an 85. And with that project, one of my favorite projects of the decade. Amazing world building, amazing alternative rock that has this glistening kind of feel to it. It feels almost like just ethereal and otherworldly at points. And it's has this nice juxtaposition with kind of this through line that Ethel Cain has had throughout her entire career so far, that through lines through religion, through kind of the experiences of religion, kind of sometimes falling into the campy sides of it. And I find that kind of theming very interesting, but allows this kind of topic and this kind of atmosphere allows Ethel Cain to go into topics of love and relationships as well as into some deeper and darker subject matter. And Ethel Cain really does a great job of creating this amazing atmosphere through the vocals and through the amazing instrumentals, and coinciding it with something very dark, but something that's very dense and something that you can really unpack and take a lot of time with. If you're looking for an amazing project this decade, Preacher's Daughter is one of them. And I remember that Ethel Cain discussed, I believe it was in an interview, that she didn't want, that people were kind of expecting her to make another Preacher's Daughter type of record. And Perverts is definitely not Preacher's Daughter Part 2. This is drone, this is dark ambient, this is more of a project that you experience more so that you enjoy. And I feel like this is a project that if you put the time and you put the dedication and you really unpack and dive deep, you're going to get a lot out of it. But if you are just a casual listener, be warned, because it is a very abrasive and very shock to the system experience. And I think with the title track and the starting track of this project, Perverts, it does really set the tone of what this project is going to be. The very first maybe 1 to 2 minutes, it sings with this kind of old-fashioned hymn, which again ties into the through line of religion that Ethel Cain has had in her projects. But the vocals are very distorted, they're very warbled, and it really reminds me of Reverend Christian Michael Hayter's Save from a couple of years ago, where it kind of goes in that occult, kind of religious, kind of this cult tape that you would find in the backwoods. And you play it, it's heavily distorted. The audio quality is not the greatest. It kind of reminds me of that kind of thing. And once it reaches about the 2 to 3 minute mark, it completely cuts out, and you are sitting with this project, with this song, for about 7 to 8 minutes of just drone. And it is something that, from a very casual perspective, you could see it's just nothing's going on. But if you really dive deep and immerse yourself into the atmosphere that this project is trying to make, it just gives me this imagery of like this gray room, this very dull gray room with kind of this really small light bulb up top that's just flickering on and off, and you hear this white distorted noise just in your ear for a good 7 to 8 minutes. It's really good at creating this tone and atmosphere that it's there if you really want to dive into it. And you do have some lyrics here, especially we're saying heaven has forsaken the masturbator, this is happening to everybody. It kind of dives into the religious aspect again, but I feel like what this project is talking about, the rejection that religion can sometimes, it's like a damning rejection that you can experience from religion, and especially religious people and the church in general. It's something that you can really dive into and unpack. What I like about this project as well is that usually when it has something crazily experimental or really drone influenced and very drone centered, it more offsets it with something that is a little bit more palatable. And I think Punish does that as well, and it kind of tackles the same kind of subject matter that the title track did, talking about rejection, talking about religion. And it's something that is slow moving, it's something that is very entrancing, and something that's a little bit more palatable, as I was saying, because it is a little bit of a shorter track on this project. And it just allows you kind of just to step into this kind of weirdly kind of just hypnotizing kind of performance. The performances are good, the singing is good, but I don't think that's the main focus here. It again is all about world building. And as you kind of go forward in this project, there's also the track House of Psychotic Woman that sounds like this kind of cycling, kind of almost washing machine kind of deal going on. And it goes on for 12 minutes with the repetition of I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. And it's all about just you can either get really immersed in it or you can really just check yourself out. And again, like this album is more to experience than it is to enjoy. So I would say definitely go into this project expecting something very different. Now, I feel like the pivotal point with this project is going to be for a lot of people is Pul Drone. And there's parts of it that I like, and there is parts of it that I do not like. Pul Drone has like this sequential 12, it's almost like this kind of reinterpretation of 12 commandments where it goes into hate, where it goes into desolation, where it goes into annihilation. It sounds very, very apocalyptic. And with this kind of this buzzing sound throughout the entire thing, with the kind of narrative behind it, it is very, very unsettling. It is a razor blade, an electric razor that's just raising a volume, lowering a volume. It's probably shaving someone's head. But with the narrative, with going through it, and how apocalyptic and how barren it sounds, it creates something that is really disturbed me uh, whenever it was done. But once the kind of narrative and kind of the spoken portion of this song ends, it is about 9 to 10 minutes. I'm really making estimates here of just the razor. And for the first 2 or 3 minutes, it's still deeply unsettling. But then it gets to a point where it may be just going on a little bit too long, where it's still raising in volume, the razor blade is lowering in volume, and you start to get to a point where you start to kind of subtract yourself from it. And it started to give me a brutal, brutal headache. And not to mention, I'm not feeling the greatest today. So having that just blaring in my ears for 12 to 13 minutes was definitely a choice that I made that I may be regretting. But towards the end of this kind of, it's almost like I would call it an experiment. The razor starts to really increase in volume. It sounds like it's really cutting something. And then all of a sudden it starts to break, it starts to fracture, and then it starts to work up again, and then it starts to break again. It's a very interesting experiment where that's where I'm kind of in the middle, where I like it, but I also don't. And I think a main part of it is that some of these songs are 12 and 15 minutes long, and there's a few of them on this project. So if you're really deciding to dive into this project, you're really in it for the long haul. But with that, once you get past Pul Drone, the last section of tracks is truly almost an entirely different album while still carrying that dark and ominous kind of tone. Etienne really just is just this amazing guitar piece that still has this kind of gray, ominous feel to it, but it just has this very subtle kind of dark beauty to it. And it kind of throws in a little bit of dark humor and something a little bit more on kind of game ending and all that kind of stuff. Not going to really say the words there, but basically it tells a story of a guy that wanted to end themselves, and the way they wanted to do it was that they were going to run as long as they could until they collapsed of a heart attack and passed on. And he did it for a day, it didn't work. He did it for another day and it didn't work. Another day, another day, another day. And it says at the end, which really kind of hits the track home, where it basically says it's just like he felt so good after doing all that he didn't want to die anymore. And with that kind of very interesting kind of vocal piece at the end, it allows for kind of something that is rewarding, that is a little darkly humorous, and allows this project to, again, just have something that you can really unpack. And I find that very interesting. Statorkia, I don't know if I pronounced it right, but this song is more of falling into the instrumental. It's a purely instrumental track, and it carries that acoustic guitar for a little bit, but then it brings electric guitars, and I think it really broadens and kind of expands the sound of this project into something that is very truly cinematic. And it's one of my favorite songs on the project. When that electric guitar comes through, it just really causes this album to open up into something so much more grand and so much more interesting in scope, where you do want to dive in more and more to see what this project is trying to say. And then Amber Waves is kind of more like Punish. It's 11 minutes, but it is talking about a relationship with someone that kind of has fallen apart, but it does sound like something that you would hear off Preacher's Daughter, with a little bit more of a darker tone. And with the electric guitars kind of implemented in, and Ethel Cain's very haunting but beautiful vocals, it creates one of the best closers I've heard so far this year, even though we're only a couple weeks in. It is great at capping this project off and really making this project a satisfying listen. And again, if you can get past Pul Drone, if you can kind of understand the concept of, I call it an experiment, you do get some really amazing moments to close out this project. They're shorter tracks, even though Amber Waves is about 11 minutes long, but it does kind of come back around to something that does truly reward the listener as you continue and as you push through the project. When it's Perverts and Punish and a couple of the other tracks like House of Psychotic Woman, it is sometimes where you may check yourself out and be like, this album is not for me. And this is totally an album that is not going to be for everyone. But I think if you want to give it the time, if you invest yourself, and if you just take the time, an hour and a half, just to listen to the project just once, I think you'll get something out of this project that is disturbing, is also beautiful, and also is thought-provoking. Now, to rate this project is interesting, because again, there's some parts of this project that I absolutely love, and there's some parts of this project where I do feel like it can overstay its welcome, or it can execute its mission in a little bit of a shorter time frame. An hour and a half is a lot to ask for a project, especially considering it's an EP. If we're getting an album that's 3 hours long, I won't be surprised. But I think I'm gonna kind of fall into a 7 out of 10 territory. It is a very, very good project. I'm probably not going to revisit it a lot, but with the listens that I've had of this project, I do really appreciate the experimentation and the ambitiousness to try something completely different. And what I do like is that it does try something completely different, but the pieces of Ethel Cain in her previous projects are still intact, just in a very different context and a very different setting. So that is Ethel Cain's Perverts. What are your thoughts on this project? Do you love it? Do you hate it? I'm glad to hear that a lot of my subscribers want me to talk about all genre, so that way I can talk about projects like this. So thank you very much for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. I'm looking to put out a video a week, possibly 2, depending on how everything goes. And I will see you in the next video.